I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy. Welcome to week 4 of the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along Dot to Dot Quilting, where I'm showing you how to use my dot to dot technique to create intricate looking designs with little to no marking. Now last week we saw the diamond design variations. This week we're doing the same thing with the starburst design. So I have my handy Basic 8 stencil. I'm ready to start quilting some variations in the bigger block. There are so many different variations of the starburst design. In this video we're just going to learn 3. First, I'm going to show you how echoing and changing the shape can create an interesting look. Then we'll combine it with the diamond design to really add a complex look to our quilting. And then last, we'll see how to use this design to put emphasis on the corners instead of the center. And then we'll talk a little bit about echoing or framing the blocks using the dot to dot technique. Instead of quilting our wedges as triangles, we're going to quilt them as diamond or kite shapes. To create our first wedge of a different shape, I'm going to quilt a diagonal line that ends about 1 inch away from the opposite corner. You can stop, reposition your hands, and then continue on. The trick is to move smoothly. And I'm going to stop about 1/4 inch inside the edge, using my foot as a guide. And then I'm going to echo to that corner and down the other side. And I'm going to try to make it symmetrical on both sides. That's what's going to make it look good. Now when I'm quilting this design without a ruler, the trickiest part is definitely coming back home to that point. So what I'm going to do is tweak the quilt to the side a bit and just move as smoothly as I can until I get to that point. Using a matching thread color also really helps hide any quilting mistakes, but I'm using this contrasting color so you can really see what I'm doing. And there you can see the very first part of our design. You can play around with the different sizes and make this wider or narrower, but now I'm going to quilt wedges on each side. So quilting directly from that point, ending about 1/4 inch from the wedge I just quilted. When I'm moving in this position, it's hard to see where I'm supposed to end up. I can use a previously quilted line as a guide, and that will really help keep me on track until I can see the edge of my block. With those longer lines, you're going to need to stop and reposition your hands, and while it might sound counterintuitive, it's going to help you get a smoother line since you'll have more control of the quilt. Echo the side and then back. So at this point, we're not using the halfway marks anymore as our guide. We're using that center and then filling in the rest of the space with our wedges. Now you notice I'm tweaking the quilt a little bit so that I'm working in a vertical position to always come home. That's what feels more comfortable for me. You may prefer to work horizontally, and if that's the case, definitely do that. Now I have half of my block finished, so I have my centerpiece and my 2 wedges, but another way you can fill in your area is to quilt a big wedge and then add echoing inside of it, which is what we're going to do now, except this time I'm going to use a ruler. Quilting my larger wedge, echoes aside to the corner, and then comes back home. If I feel like this space is not quite filled in enough, I can add another echo line on the inside. The echo lines can be as close or as far from the original line as you prefer. And there I have my first variation. You can see what the echoed wedge looks like, adding more lines to the corner, giving it that centerpiece, or by filling it in with smaller wedges. With this design, we're going to combine the starburst and the diamond design to create an amazing look. I'm going to start by quilting the first part of an X, going from corner to corner, traveling along the edge, and then starting the second part, but I'm going to stop in the middle of the block. Once I'm in the middle, I'm going to stop and I'm going to quilt 2 of my triangles with wedges. Now the problem is I don't really have 2 triangles, but I can imagine that there's a line right here. However many wedges I quilt on one side, I'm going to do on the other because I want to make it symmetrical. Again, I'm just pretending that my X is completed and making sure I leave myself enough room to add the next part of the design. Now at this point, I could leave it unquilted, but I think I'm going to add part of the diamond design. So I'll do the first side, and then I'll travel so that I can do the next side. Traveling along the seam is what makes these designs so efficient. I don't want to have to break threads several times just to quilt one design. But if traveling isn't something you like, you could definitely leave it out. And the result is a design that's half diamond, half starburst, but 100% amazing. Now, instead of having all my wedges come from the center, I'm gonna have them all face from the corner in the same direction. I'm gonna use my Basic 8 stencil to mark just an X in my block. That's gonna help me visualize where I'm gonna put the wedges. So I have my 2 sides right here to my corner, and I'm gonna quilt my wedges within that space. Then I'm gonna quilt the first part of my X. Doing the same on the other side, just facing in the opposite direction. And a little traveling to get to the next corner, where I'm gonna quilt the same wedges in that area. And then one last triangle to fill in, and this design will be done. And the result is a different kind of starburst that puts the emphasis on the corners instead of the center. Now that we learned a few variations of the starburst design, let's talk about echoing outside of the block. Last week I showed you how to use a dot-to-dot technique to do that, where we pick 2 corners for the design to touch, and then 2 corners for them not to touch. It's going to give it a completely different look. This gray line is meant to represent the block or the seam, and you can tell that echoing really extends out and changes the shape of the block. And if I wanted to, I could even keep adding more of those echo lines and really building it up. But I think what will be fun is to do another echo line, except I'm gonna change the points that touch. So these points down here, that over here that don't touch the corner, those are now gonna touch, and these ones will be the space. So I've repositioned to the corner that's gonna touch, and then I'm gonna have it not touch until I return home. And if you're not sure where to go, here's a little tip for you. If you do this, your second line should echo the side of your block. So that's gonna give you a good reference on where to go. Now, one of the benefits of using a ruler isn't just that you get straight-ish lines. It really helps you see where your line's going to end up. It makes it a lot easier to eyeball the design if you have a good idea where your line is going to end. And honestly, I could keep going. I could add more and more echo lines around the outside, especially if I don't know what I want to do in the rest of the quilt, or I could stop here. Either way, it's going to look amazing. Okay, here's your challenge for this week. Go ahead and quilt your favorite starburst variations in those bigger marked squares on your quilt. There's 4 of them. You can do 4 different variations, or you can quilt the same one. And if you'd like, you can echo around the outside of them using the dot-to-dot technique that I showed you earlier. At the end of the challenge, I'll give you instructions for finishing all the background quilting, but if you're a little eager to get started, we're gonna do the same thing on this side that we did on the last side. By quilting along those drawn lines, adding some echoing, and then filling in with a filler of your choice. And as always, I have free downloadable quilting diagrams. And you can ask any questions that you have either in the comments below, or you're welcome to join our Facebook group where I get on there and answer questions as well. I cannot wait to see what dot-to-dot designs you come up with. Well, I'll see you next week when we're going to talk about quilting dot-to-dot in borders of our quilts. I'll see you then.